Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for being a part of our 6th annual Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Conference. My name is Cheryl Fritz, and I am the Chief Human Resources Officer here at Webster University. Our final session of the conference is called Diversity and You, and is being led by Tanja Kirby and Meg Gwynn, both HR business partners in human resources here at Webster University. And I am thankful that I get to work with them closely every day. Both are invested in working with our leaders and our employees to help HR partner to support our mission at Webster University. Tanja has 10 years of talent and business-based HR experience with an MBA, and in her role strategically partners with leaders to implement effective people management practice. She holds a special certification in a TICSA Title IX hearing. She has a passion for identifying gaps and improving HR processes by implementing changes necessary to strengthen our work together and our university. And with more than 14 years of human resources experience, a certification as a professional in human resources, along with her MBA, Meg Gwynn values working with our employees to strategically plan and collaboratively innovate toward the success of the university. In her current position, she enjoys encouraging diverse recruiting and partnering with management to strengthen organizational engagement. I'm looking forward to hearing their insights as we explore diversity and you. Take it away, Tanja and Meg.
Thanks, Cheryl, for that wonderful introduction. Now I'm off of mute. So hi, everyone, and happy Black History Month. My name is Tanja Kirby.
And I'm Meg Gwynn, and we want to welcome you to our webinar session today on DEI and you. We are so pleased that you could join us. Please note that this event is being recorded and all lines are muted. Recording of this session will be made available in just a few days, posted on the HR website. There is a Q&A section next to the chat box for questions. Before we get started, we wanted to thank Vincent Flewellen, the Chief Diversity Officer here at Webster University, for asking us to present at this year's DEI conference. It is our privilege and honor to deliver this important material to you today.
Well, thank you. Well, today we will be diving deep into the mental psyche. Yes, I did say mental psyche. And going on a self-discovery to understand the concepts that are vitally important to preventing harassment in the workplace. It's critically important that we continue our efforts to move from talk to action and create inclusive habits that will assist us in fighting systemic racism. Now, our job today is to introduce you to a few basic DEI concepts like unconscious bias, implicit bias, and microaggressions. Determining how these concepts impact real world behavior so we can impact change. We also will be launching an exciting new diversity champion initiative through the HR department starting on Monday. The program will be open to all, and we will go over how this program will go beyond conversation and help us drive our future. Now, HR has prepped 4 videos to share with you from experts on bias. Now, the material does not give you a lot of time to do a lot of self-reflection, so please, if you need to take notes, feel free, but also you're going to be able to access this presentation again for review. We will also be taking questions at the end. So first up, we'll have our speaker will be talking to us about unconscious bias and how we can master it by training our psyche. So without further delay, our first video is from Talia Fox, and she's the CEO of Kusi Training.
Unconscious bias has become such a popular topic. I know everybody at this point, so many people have sat in classes. I've been in another classroom. I've been talking to people about what unconscious bias really means. And what that is that we have people all around the world that aren't just studying unconscious bias, aren't sitting in a classroom, but they are experiencing the impact of feeling like they are not enough, or feeling they're not treated equally or fairly in their offices and their workplaces. Now, this is going in a direction that is going to get a little bit different, because I'm not here to tell you that you need to fix unconscious bias. You'll get that in the training classroom. What I'm here to do is to convince you that the best way for you to get everything that you need in life is to master unconscious bias. Now let me tell you what I mean by that. So unconscious bias, for those of you, let's get a quick refresher here. Unconscious bias is this thing that our brain does on a regular basis where we literally see something and we decide what category to put that thing in, right? So for example, you see someone walking on the street and your brain says, is this danger? Is this safe? Is this somebody I want to talk to? So this is what unconscious bias does. Every single person in the world is unconsciously biased because we are human beings. Human beings put people in categories to protect themselves, and so it's a very, very good thing. However, where it goes wrong is that we are now in a world where our unconscious bias has gone rampant. We are just judging and criticizing, and even the unconscious bias is transitioning into a hate, and a hate that we have never, ever seen before. So what is the benefit for you to invest in mastering and getting a hold of your own mind's common and deliberate capacity to categorize people and make assumptions about who they are? So here is the thing, folks. You are not judging other people when you are upset with them. You are judging yourself. The worst unconscious bias that we deal with on an everyday basis is how we think about ourselves. And that is the thing that leads us to make decisions that don't help you, don't help your organization, and don't help the world. I'll tell you quickly what I mean by that. Your entire life can absolutely change once you change how you feel and what you think about yourself. I talked to a woman and she said to me many, many times, I am just a government worker. And I said, how do you expect to be anything more if the way you feel about yourself includes a just a? But she also looks at other people and says, he is just a this. So every time you look at someone else and you put them in a category, and it's a category of judgment, a category of disapproval, if you could do this one simple thing, it will change everything. What does that say about how you think about who you are? So as we think about unconscious bias, a couple of things that you can do in order to really make an impact. Number one, how are you being unconsciously biased to yourself, and how can you use that to change your whole image and vision of who you are? And secondly, can you let people off the hook? Is there a way that you can interact with just a couple people today and stop your mind from putting them into a category? Just give them a chance, because it's the same chance that you hope that people will give you. So as we continue to learn about unconscious bias, folks, yes, this is about the workplace, but this is about who we are as people and how we're connecting. So I'm in and on this journey with you. Let's continue to get better, because as we get better, we can change the world.
So Ms. Fox is asking us to master our unconscious bias through self-discovery, figuring out who we are and who we want to be. So challenge yourself to interact with different people and be mindful to not put people in a box. Ask yourself, how are we connecting? Next, we will share a video with you from Project Implicit and the New York Times regarding implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
2016 was the year that implicit bias went somewhat mainstream.
Yeah, so when Hillary Clinton mentioned implicit bias in the debates, our phones started blowing up, all our friends started emailing us about it.
But what is implicit bias? Implicit biases are basically thought processes that happen without you even knowing it. Little mental shortcuts that hold judgments you might not agree with. And sometimes those shortcuts are based on race. First, some clarity. Saying someone has an implicit bias is different from calling someone a racist.
The word racist is a highly loaded term, right, here in American society. A lot of times when people are using it, they're thinking of the kind of old-fashioned Ku Klux Klan style racist.
But implicit bias isn't anywhere near that, explicit.
Implicit bias is something that comes out of ordinary mental functioning, out of how the mind normally works.
We've all grown up in a culture with
media images, news images, conversations we heard at home, our education. Think of that as a fog we've been breathing our whole life. We never even realized it, what we were taking in.
And that fog causes associations that lead to biases.
I somehow know that if you say peanut butter, I'm going to say jelly. That's an association that's been ingrained in me because throughout my life, peanut butter and jelly are together. And in many forms of media, there is an overrepresentation of Black men and violent crime being paired together.
And because of that, I actually deep down inside have been taught that Black men are violent and aggressive and not to be trusted, that they're criminals, that they're thugs.
With all those associations, I'm not trying to let us off the hook, but in some ways, none of us stood a chance.
Starting today, we'll post a video a day dealing with one challenge of understanding implicit bias and its relationship to race and exploring ways we might combat the problem. One more thing, if you're seeing this and thinking that it doesn't apply to you, well, you might be falling prey to the blind spot bias. That's the scientific name for a mental bias that allows you to see biases in others, but not in yourself. We're biased.
Okay, so the video talked about how implicit bias refers to the attitudes that we have towards certain people or the associated stereotype that our brain processes. We are usually unaware of these. We're usually unaware of,
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
Implicit bias.
2000.
Apologies. We are usually unaware of these shortcuts that our brain takes. Note that the clip mentions it is different than racism. To be able to function, our brain takes many shortcuts throughout the day. But where do these shortcuts come from? As mentioned, there's so much influence from media images, news images, conversation, and education. Now, reflecting on their mention of the blind spot bias and you, are you in a blind spot bias? Do you think implicit bias doesn't apply to you? Do you see others are biased, but not yourself? I encourage you to self-reflect on this.
The formal definition of a microaggression is listed behind me. Simply put, microaggressions are insults that are rooted in stereotype, and they're directed at someone because of their membership within a marginalized group. Now, because they are rooted in stereotype, they limit a person's ability to be able to see people as individuals. In 1970, Dr. Chester Middlebrook Pierce, a professor at Harvard, coined the term microaggressions to describe insults and dismissive behavior he witnessed Black people enduring. But now the term has been expanded to include offensive comments and behaviors that are directed at anyone in a marginalized group, including but not limited to women, people of color, people with disabilities, and people who are older. So one of the things about microaggressions is that they're very prevalent in society, and I could do a full day's discussion about that. I actually developed a training that I share with companies to help them address offensive comments in their workplace. We're just going to go through a couple examples here today. But it's important to note that we all have biases, and anyone can be guilty of making a microaggression or being subjected to one. So why does it matter? Well, for some people, just being themselves can be a revolutionary act because their very being is crushing stereotypes of who and what they should be. Microaggressions wound people. If we were to compare it to getting a paper cut, one paper cut is manageable, but paper cuts all over your body is something quite different. And it's this accumulation of offensive comments in social settings and professional settings that begin to take a toll on a person's spirit. Microaggressions can be an amorphous concept, but it's my hope through the examples I'm going to provide for you that I can provide a more definitive understanding. Microaggressions regarding disability are prevalent. For example, making comments like, "I'm so OCD about my files," or "Ugh, I can't read today, I'm so dyslexic," when someone does not actually have dyslexia or OCD, can be perceived as a microaggression. These phrases are examples of ableist language, and they trivialize something that is quite serious. For some historical context, I want to discuss what happened when the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed in 1990. The ADA makes it illegal in employment to discriminate against someone because of a mental or physical disability. It also guarantees access to buildings and to public and private transportation. Shortly before the act was passed, several disability activists came to DC and they climbed the 83 steps outside the Capitol building. They met at the base of the stairs and they got out of their wheelchairs, they took off their crutches and any kind of assistive walking devices, and they dragged or crawled themselves up all 83 steps. Now, I like to share this story because it's a good reminder about the historical exclusion that people with disabilities have had to face. And it's also a good reminder that there was a group of people that felt so disenfranchised, so marginalized, and so unseen that they felt the need to do this. Microaggressions regarding race are also very plentiful. Some people might be surprised to know that professing colorblindness can actually be a form of a microaggression. Examples would be, "I don't see color," "I was raised to treat everyone the same," "I work in a diverse environment," "I was in the Peace Corps." It's important to note, that is funny. It's important to note that mere proximity to people of color does not make someone woke. Nor does it make them automatically knowledgeable about social injustice issues. These comments actually deny the existence of people of color's experience in the world. And me personally, I've seen these phrases used in a defensive posture when someone's being challenged about something that they may have said that's offensive. What it actually does is shut down conversation and it allows stereotypes to continue. The last microaggression that I want to talk about is the phrase, "that's so ghetto," or "that's ghetto." Now, Saturday Night Live has done a sketch about this phrase, and it's tossed around in the workplace and in professional settings, but this phrase can be very offensive to people, and I'm going to provide some historical context as to why. So the word ghetto is an Italian pronunciation. The word is used in 1516 to describe an area of the city where Jewish people are living in the city of Venice. Then in 1899, the word is being used to describe where minority groups are living in the city, and again, it tends to be a low-income area. From a US perspective, the word has been associated with Black and brown people who live in low-income areas. What we're essentially talking about is a place in the city where people are being regulated because of poverty, disenfranchisement, and reasons that point to systemic racism. Now, when I'm talking about systemic racism, what do I mean by that? Well, the GI Bill would be a good example. In 1944, President Roosevelt signed the first version of the GI Bill into law. And that bill essentially made it possible for veterans to go to college and also gave them the ability to get low-interest mortgages, which this sounds like a really good program, and it is. Unfortunately, the way it was administered, it was very discriminatory to Black veterans. The Veterans Administration refused to guarantee loans for developers who plan to sell homes to Black people. When I'm talking about systemic racism, I'm also talking about redlining. Redlining is the practice of drawing a circle around Black and brown neighborhoods and then refusing to give loans to those areas. What I'm also talking about is pushing and shuttling people into a specific area of the city and then setting up situations so that the property remains undervalued. When people use the phrase, "that's ghetto," or "that's so ghetto," it's a way of making fun of someone or something. And for the reasons I just shared, it's not funny. So now that I've given you a couple examples of what a microaggression is, I want to give you a couple tools to avoid making these kind of comments in the workplace. The first tool or tip is pretty simple, is pause. Before you ask someone a personal question in the workplace, pause. Before you compare someone to something or to someone else, pause. Before describing someone's personality, pause. And when you're pausing, think to yourself, what could potentially be the impact on what I'm about to say to someone? Not just my intention, but what could be the possible impact that the way this person could take what I'm saying? Could they be possibly offended? The next thing I want to think about is this comment necessary? Is it promoting a growth mindset? Because remember, my number one priority when I'm at work is to be productive. The next thing that you can do to try to avoid making a microaggression is research. As I discussed in the previous example about that's so ghetto, a lot of American English is slang. So before adding a new word to your vocabulary, just do a quick Google search, just to make sure that what you're saying is not offensive. So before I leave here this afternoon, what I want to leave with you with is, during the course of this conversation, I've been talking about inclusion and respect, which is important, and I hope that you leave this talk with that understanding. But I hope you also took from this talk the concepts of kindness and human decency. Thinking about something before I say it, that's a form of kindness. And treating people the way I want to be treated is one of the highest forms of kindness. Thank you.
All righty, so that was attorney Tiffany Alvoyd from the UCLA Law School. So we forgot to do her introduction, but Ms. Alvoyd really broke down what microaggressions are and what they are, and that we are all guilty of using them at one time or another. They are a part of our past, present, and we're learning about microaggressions so that they will not become a part of our future. But for now, they are. Ms. Alvoyd talked about the concept of wokeness. So if you're a part of this audience and you're awoke to racial injustices, that's great. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. I would argue, though, that some of us do get lost in our beliefs, and sometimes at one point or another, it interferes, and we get into what we call the defensive posture, like the attorney just stated. When people say insensitive things, we shut down and we aggressively go after that individual instead of taking an opportunity to talk to others and open up an opportunity for growth. And that's what we're really looking for here. Ms. Alvoyd goes on to say that microaggressions can be eliminated by doing 3 simple things, and that's pausing, think about what you're about to say to someone else, have a growth mindset, 2, have a growth mindset and look at the necessity of what you're saying. 3, and research racial sensitivity. So recently I found out they can go on the Google to look up racially insensitive things. So she also had some important walkaways that I think sometimes we miss, especially today, because everything is super sensitive. The 2 things that she said that she wanted you to walk away with from her speech is just human decency and kindness. So if we treat each other with those 2 simple concepts, I think we'll come out on the better end. So next, we'll have another TED Talk from a wonderful speaker, Valerie Alexander. I think you guys will all enjoy this. She's packed with a lot of life applications. She will also help us understand how to outsmart our bias by changing the unexpected to the expected. Take a listen.
Let's start with a brain exercise. I'm going to ask you to visualize 3 scenarios. The visualization part is very important, so please close your eyes, take a deep breath, and imagine you're late to catch a flight. You rush through the airport, you make it through security, you run to the gate, you make it down the jetway, you step on the plane just as they close the door behind you, and the pilot steps out of the cockpit to say hi. You get to your destination, you go to a local restaurant, and you have the best meal of your life. I mean, really enjoy this. There's no calories in visualization. And at the table next to you is a couple happily celebrating their anniversary. The next morning, you go to the biggest technology conference in the world, and the CEO of this year's hottest tech startup just took the stage to speak. Now, you should have a solid picture of all of that, so open your eyes, because I have some questions for you. In your mental image, was the pilot black? Was the married couple 2 men? Did the tech CEO on stage look like me? It's okay if one or all of your answers is no. Your brain creates images of what's familiar. It's less of a fan of what's not familiar. The things I mentioned are generally less familiar. The black pilot, the same-sex married couple, the female tech CEO. No matter how much you might love the idea of those things, when immediately confronted with them, the amygdala, that's the most ancient part of your brain, signals the hypothalamus to fire up the hypothalamic pituitary axis, which is where the brain and the endocrine system intersect. So at this point, your adrenal glands release cortisol into your bloodstream, which triggers your stress response. This is the physiology of stress, according to the Dartmouth Undergraduate Journal of Science, and it happens in a matter of milliseconds, long before you have the chance to consciously think, I'm so happy these 2 men have the freedom to marry who they love. As Dr. Susan Fiske explains, when it comes to unfamiliar social situations, there's ample evidence that encountering something fundamentally different from what we expect elicits a stronger activation in the amygdala than encountering something or someone we perceive as the norm. This is what kept our species alive for millions of years. This instantaneous instinctive response triggers fight or flight, which is what kept us from being eaten by saber-toothed tigers or killed by a member of a foreign tribe. But in modern society, our brains still do this. When we encounter the unexpected, our heart races slightly, our blood pressure goes up, we sweat a little, and for no discernible reason, we just feel stressed out. There's a Chinese blessing that doubles as a curse. May you live in interesting times. I am the CEO of a tech company right now, which makes these some very interesting times. I recently had a call with a potential investor in which everything clicked. He got the concept, he loved what we were building, he had key insight about our tech. And so we agreed on a day to speak again, and he said, great, why don't you ping me then? And I said, you got it. And then he said, oh, wait, is that one of those phrases I'm not supposed to use with you? Because he's a man and I'm a woman, and in the tech world right now, careers are being destroyed and entire venture funds collapsing because some men have behaved incredibly inappropriately towards women. He was afraid of using the phrase, ping me. Now that might seem ridiculous, but we now live in a world where words and phrases rapidly take on new meaning. If you need proof, just look at the Facebook post of any guy who got a text from his mom that says, hi, honey, if you want to come over tonight, we can Netflix and chill. If you don't understand why that's funny, Google Netflix and chill. He asked, is that one of those phrases I'm not supposed to use with you? And there it was. I could practically hear the cortisol coursing through his bloodstream. No matter how well we clicked or what he thought of my company, it was still in his brain that I'm not just a CEO, I'm a female CEO. And working with me might be a minefield of dangers he has to think about. Not because of anything he would ever do or anything I would ever do, but because men neither of us had ever met couldn't control their bro-havior. And women we both respect bravely chose not to remain silent, because speaking up is the only way we're going to make progress. So in addition to all the risks inherent in investing in an early stage startup company, there's an added layer of much scarier risks that come from working with me. The irony is that while some investors might feel that way, for another cohort, because I'm over 40, they don't even see me. I am simultaneously both highly dangerous and invisible. Who knew that at this stage in my career I'd become a ninja? Is that one of those phrases I'm not supposed to use with you? I'm so grateful that he asked. I'm happy that he felt safe enough to ask and know that I wouldn't pummel him for it. If we're going to get anywhere close to equality, let's stop attacking our allies. When someone is willing to admit and discuss that there might be a problem with their own behavior, we can't penalize them for that. How would any of us feel to be excluded from the equality conversation because of what we visualized at the start of this talk? By asking the question, I knew this man was willing to examine his own behavior. And I believe that the biggest stumbling block to achieving true equality is unexamined behavior. When men in the startup world start to wonder, if I work with women, am I going to someday be the subject of an incendiary blog post? The answer is no, just continue to examine your behavior. When working with female founders and colleagues and executives, ask yourself, if this was a man, would I gently stroke his shoulder as I suggest we meet again? Would I comment on how well his t-shirt flatters his figure? Would I place a higher value on his appearance than his experience in determining his probability of success? If not, don't do it to her. It's that simple. Sadly, the much simpler response to the female threat is no, you will not be the subject of an angry blog post. Just don't work with women.
Right.
Of course, no one would ever say that out loud. But somewhere in that amygdala, a synapse fires towards flight in the face of an unnamed potential danger, and stress hormones flood the bloodstream. Can't explain it, don't know why, but whatever makes you feel happy and comfortable around people who look and act like you is the same thing that makes you come up with logical, explicable, totally defensible reasons not to work with someone you just don't click with. And when it comes to equality, examining our own behavior applies to women too. I started my career as a securities lawyer in the Silicon Valley at the dawn of the internet era. It was an insane time to be there. As a first-year associate, I billed 2,800 hours. One night, I left the office around 2 a.m., which was typical. And so I left my timesheets for my assistant to process because she got in the mornings before I did. So the next day, when I got to my desk, about 5 minutes later, my assistant walks in holding my timesheets. And she said, "Would you like me to show you how to enter these into the billing system?" I mean, sweet as pie. And I sat stunned for a moment, then politely declined her kind offer. But that question really started to bother me. Why would my assistant ask the attorney she works for if I want to learn how to do her job? So I started asking around. Of the 14 male attorneys in our group, none had ever been asked if he wanted to learn how to use the billing system. We had a partner who didn't know there was a billing system. But of the 6 female attorneys, I was the only one who had never entered her own timesheets. Some of them did it regularly and some just once or twice, but they all knew how. So again, I asked why. Why would you spend a resource as precious as your time on work someone else is already getting paid to do? One answer was, oh, it's not that hard. Women do this to ourselves a lot. We do work that's someone else's job because we're capable and we just want it to get done. If a task is on someone else's to-do list, please don't be the first person in line to do it for them. Not only does that hurt you, it sets an expectation that hurts all other women. The other answer to my question was, it's just easier. The knowing laugh. Translation, it's just easier to do my assistant's work than to make my assistant do it. When we talk about gender disparity in the workplace, we discuss the different treatment women receive in performance reviews and promotions, or in hiring and salary negotiations. But we rarely discuss the treatment women receive from subordinates. We fail to acknowledge how exhausting it is to not get the basic level of support needed to do our jobs, and that our male colleagues enjoy without even thinking twice about it. Or to get it, but only because we demanded it, and risked being labeled a certain word, or two. So we give in. We pile more on our own plates, because in the short term, it's just easier. And in the long term, we burn out and leave. And in hindsight, everyone wonders why there aren't more women in higher ranking positions. Because no one ever examined the behavior. The funny thing about my situation is that if you asked the assistants in that group if they treated male attorneys and female attorneys differently, I'm pretty sure every one of them would have said, no way. And yet, no male attorney had ever been asked if he wanted to learn how to do administrative work, and every female attorney had. That's the real danger of unexamined behavior, the belief that we're treating everyone equally, when in reality, we're not. When we stop and examine our own behavior, we can catch ourselves having different reactions to and expectations of people simply because they don't look like us, or worse, because they do. The human brain is a remarkable achievement in evolution. The prefrontal cortex evolved itself into existence when we needed more processing capacity. How amazing is that? But the amygdala, that's been there since the earliest records of human existence. When it encounters the unexpected, it floods your system with stress hormones. Fight or flight is what kept our species alive for millions of years. None of us in 100 lifetimes will ever be able to change that trigger inside our brains. So our only solution is to change what's outside our brains, to consciously turn the unexpected into the expected so that we don't have unconscious hormonal reactions that keep our society from moving forward. How do you do that? How do you change the unexpected to the expected? Well, there are 3 things you can try. 1, as you go about your day, visualize situations before they happen. The meeting you're about to walk into, the new doctor you're seeing, the driver you just pulled over for having a broken taillight. And whatever mental picture you get, change it. Open yourself to different possibilities. The second thing, when we do encounter the unexpected, have the courage to examine your own behavior. Ask yourself, is this how I would handle this interaction if this person looked like me? Or if this person didn't look like me? Third, make a conscious effort to expose yourself and your children and others to that which is currently unexpected and doesn't need to be. Hire the employees, patronize the businesses, vote for the candidates who have earned the position and are also challenging the norms. There are enormous and long-ranging consequences when we can change the unexpected to the expected. Consider this. We have 2 entire generations in the world whose first visual image of a United States president is black. It doesn't matter what kind of hate or ugliness might have been spoken in their homes, that picture is always within the realm of the expected for them. We normalize things by making them expected. That is the first step towards keeping all women from being seen as higher risk investments. and women of a certain age from becoming ninjas. Let's do another visualization. Once again, please, close your eyes and take a deep breath. Now imagine you're sitting in a college class on computer programming and the professor just walked in. Picture the Facebook post of a friend congratulating a couple who just adopted a baby. Visualize your state swearing in a new governor. Now, open your eyes and raise your hand if your mental image differed substantially now than it did at the beginning of this talk. That earlier brain exercise we did is something I do at the start of most investor meetings. It's my way of tricking them into examining their own behavior. But it's also how I consciously turn the unexpected into the expected before we get to the point in my pitch where I share with them that when we complete a Series A round of venture financing, the chief financial officer we're bringing on board is Black. And the story of my company starts with 2 happily married men. And the CEO of this year's hottest tech startup looks exactly like me. Thank you.
I can listen to Valerie Alexander all day, but she is challenging us to examine our behavior and realizing the danger of unexamined behavior, which is the belief that we're treating everyone equal when we're not. We can change the unexpected to the expected by doing 3 things: visualizing something before it happens and change it. 2, examine. How would you handle this situation if the person looked like me or not? 3, normalize. Normalize the unexpected and make it the expected.
All right, so why does all of this matter that we're talking about today? Well, I'll tell you, it's because in the real world, biases have consequences and it really impacts behavior. So what we're doing now is we don't want those type of biases to impact our behavior. We're gonna have to recognize the biases and set a path not to let them have dominion over our organizations. So as you know, biases can predict which resumes get calls back. Why performance evaluations of people of color are lower than their white counterparts. Why performance reviews of women employees are documented or deemed to be ambitious or overconfident. Even body language can be misunderstood. Bias impacts a lot of things, like it impacts shooting of unarmed Black men, and how even facial expressions can draw unfortunate conclusions. So let's start talking about developing diversity habits like we've been doing throughout this presentation that will promote inclusion habits. All righty, so we're going to talk about the inclusion habits. We have a program that was developed by Amanda Felke. She's a professor over in economics. She's the chair of the Department of Economics, Business and Finance, and the chair of Entrepreneurship Innovation program at Lake Forest University. Now, she states that one of the drawbacks to training is that humans tend to forget new information after we learn it if we do not regularly apply it. So she added that depending on the content, if the information we learn does not reinforce what we already know to be true, we forget it even faster. So for diversity inclusion, this means that people who do not believe that they have biases to begin with will not likely remember the content presented during this training session about biases. So what if we could systematically reprogram our errors in our thinking when it comes to inclusion? I'm going to go through 6 layers that build, or me and Meg are going to go through 6 layers that build on one another. And we'll also give you small things that you can do to help you kind of remember those habits, those inclusion habits. We're going to call them commitment devices. So the commitment devices may reduce your time inconsistencies and help change your individual behavior to create new habits. Let's take them one by one.
So the first thing we must do is to believe inclusion matters. Engage in wanting to change a habit, you have to believe in it. For example, diverse companies have 19% higher innovation revenue, outperform other companies by 46 to 58%, and generate 34% greater returns to shareholder, according to Blog Bonus. So diverse companies are clearly convinced that different perspectives helps their bottom line. Here's what you can do today to commit. Share with a colleague to grow your knowledge, or grow their knowledge of diversity issues, and increase your likelihood of remembering the information yourself.
All right, the next layer is recognize bias. This tool basically, it provides tools to identify and measure bias. You want to create a new habit, recognize your bias, give people a vocabulary around what they are thinking about and what they're trying to do to change their behavior. Then they'll be able to do something about it. You will see people trying to change their habits by measuring their bias and then trying to make a meaningful change. Think about it when you go to work. We don't think about all the little, we don't think about the microaggressions that happen to us in a day. So this is a phase people get an opportunity to frame their biases. Here's a commitment that you can do today. When you encounter someone new today, conclude to yourself that specific person in a box, or give them specific information about a person, or do you make presumptions about someone, and is it warranted presumptions?
Disperse negativity, redirect defensive effort to positive change. This is the phase where people have the propensity to withdraw. We must learn from our mistakes, but if people don't face the bias, they won't move beyond it. So try to redirect it so that actions are thoughtful. Redirect them outward so that you can face your bias and start to think of ways to change your behavior. A small thing to do with this commitment device would be to think about 3 things that you have done differently that impacted someone negative today. Write them down so that you can retain them and not repeat it.
All right, so the next one is think slow. Practice aligning actions with values and intentions. When you notice a microaggression, a single microaggression often goes unnoticed because they are so small, but because they're so pervasive, their effects add up quickly. Just like Attorney Alvoy said, it's like mini cuts, and can take toll on those who are on the receiving end. So you can think about times in your day when you're low energy and relying on intuition. Maybe there are times in your day when you're multitasking and relying on intuition. Well, in those instances, it's going to give your brain an opportunity to filter out that fast thinking and that potential bias and put it in line with your intentions and your values. So a small thing you can do today is to make note of who interrupts who in a meeting today that you might have. Notice who's doing the interrupting and who's being interrupted and how that impacts them.
Change intuition. We can override our biases. We need to seek out differences. In most facets of our lives, we surround ourselves with people who are like us, our family members, our friends, our neighbors. Research shows that exposure to people different than you is the most effective way to enhance empathy and make you more inclusive. So yes, we can reprogram systemic errors, override biases. A commitment device you can allow today is to find a person to follow on social media that is different than you in several ways.
All right, last one, enhance empathy. Finally, the gold standard is to enhance empathy. You become unconsciously competent. You can actually become more empathetic and hone inclusivity of unseen diversity. I'll give you an example. Over 1 billion people, roughly 15% of the world's population, currently live with a disability, and the rates of disabilities are rising. So worldwide, as Attorney Alvoy stated earlier in this most marginalized groups of people, as you work today, take a handicap accessible route. That's right, no steps, no doors that automatically open. Notice if it takes more time and energy for you to get to your desk. So think small. That's one of my favorite sayings that I've dragged with me throughout my career. When we think small, we can really concentrate on the little things that have the biggest impact. So small steps that can lead to big changes.
So we've unearthed a lot regarding biases and related information. We'd like to give you an opportunity to put this knowledge into play through our Diversity Champion Initiative. The Diversity Champion Initiative participants will include 3 steps here. There's 1, a diversity pledge, 2, completing the 21-day Coupa challenge, and 3, develop and initiate a diversity department goal, and then attesting to the completion of these steps. More details in the next slide. So we invite all employees to join us in the Diversity Champion Initiative, and external participants are welcome to mirror this program. Be an ambassador. It's an opportunity to do your part to support a diverse and inclusive community. Earn your Diversity Champion Initiative logo. This Diversity Champion Initiative starts this Monday, March 1st. This initiative, including the 3 steps mentioned in your Testament of Completion, will be available through a link provided in Webster Today on Monday. So once your Diversity Champion Initiative is completed, you'll have this Diversity Champion Initiative logo to add to your signature block.
Awesome. So real quick, because we are running out of time, the 21-day Racial Equity Habit Building Challenge. This challenge will help build some of the habits that we've been talking about throughout this presentation. So this slide and this presentation will be available for you kind of review. But if you guys have any questions about the program and want to get involved, please feel free to contact either me, Tanja Kirby, or Megan Gwynn at the university. We'll be more than happy to connect you with the challenge and connect you with all the material that comes with it. We so look forward to you guys joining us on this challenge and in this program. We're so super excited about it. So please earn your diversity badge, as Megan just stated. We look forward to talking with you in the future.
Thank you everyone for attending and graciously giving us your time.
I want to thank Megan and Tanja and Cheryl, our partners today in our Human Resource Department. This was an ideal way to end a 3-day conference. We have had such opportunities to learn, to reflect, to interrogate, to investigate, to self-examine over these 3 days. And we know that ultimately the goal is to improve ourselves, to improve our environment, to improve our community, to change the world, and to be true to the values and the actions and the behaviors that are required to make a more diverse world inclusive and equitable. I want to thank all who have presented in these 3 days. I want to thank the Conference Planning Committee. This is the strongest conference we have ever had in our 6 years, in my opinion. The content, the presenters, the range of topics, it really has been deeply moving, informative, well-researched, and gave us such tools that are immediately usable. So I thank all the presenters, and I thank the Conference Planning Committee for assembling this. I thank our sponsors. They make it possible that we can do 3 days of strong programming available at absolutely no charge to the public and open to the public. And so many of you have responded this year. Over 2,000 individuals registered for this year's conference. It's a stunning and remarkable community that's been built in the chat rooms and the question and answer, and we encourage those connections to just continue. It's important to be part of a community to do this work, whether you're working on yourself or you're working in the community in your department, as we've just been challenged to do and given the opportunity to do, or whether we're doing it in our broader community to make the world a more equitable place. And I really thank everyone, wherever you are on that path to greater equity. We welcome you and we welcome your participation, of course, in this conference, but not only in the conference. Certainly, you can look forward to our 7th annual conference happening next February, but I'm going to tell you about an opportunity to engage with DEI work and content even sooner. Of course, many of our departments at Webster are offering programming and have been during February, and they will again during March and all throughout the year. But I want to call out one specific one, and I want to thank our Chief Diversity Officer, Vincent Flewellen, for leading this work and these kinds of sessions and these intentional efforts in our community with such success. March 24th, we will resume Webster Speaks, and it happens for an hour starting at 7 p.m. Central. Webster Speaks, Dialogues on Race, Equity, and Inclusion, led by Vincent Flewellen, and we already have a dynamic program ready to post and that you can register for, and we truly look forward to continuing this conversation and this work with you. May you have a wonderful rest of your day and rest of 2021. Stay safe and stay well.